there was a glass ceiling that I'd hit. As a
Mm.
woman, I felt like there was a space that was more, I would say, carved out for men. I think at the start of November, I'd found a tumor in my breast.
It's 7 o'clock on the dot. Where is Usher?
Is it a truck stop?
He's in his drop top.
Oh, no. So,
Hi, Andrina. How are you?
hi, I'm good, pretty good today. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so happy to have you on. And guess what I found out? For
What?
today, I've known you for 2 months exactly.
Really?
Yes.
When do you use as a starting point? Like when was our first, was it
When you,
our first Slack message?
our first Slack message, you messaged me on April 20th.
Oh wow.
Then today is, what's that? June 20th?
Yeah, that was like right after I met Nebo, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was like trying to find your name. Like I was like looking for Brian. I searched for Ryan. I'm like, which one of these names sound like a Jamaican name? Then eventually I found Nebo and he told me.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting because when I saw it and I said, only 2 months, it feels like 2 years.
I know, right? It feels a lot
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
When was I in Berlin? Like that even feels longer.
So
Maybe,
far, yeah. You're
may-
in May. You're in Berlin in May, right?
yes, because I actually came back to Canada on May 20th, which was my anniversary. So yes, that week
Okay.
of
Yes, yes, yes.
the
You
week
made
ending
it.
20th. Yes, I did.
I'm
Just
sure your husband really appreciated that.
yeah, yeah, I think so. Although I was like so tired, but yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And there's this thing I heard you say in a previous interview that you bathe 2 or 3 times per day.
Yes. Yeah, no, I do. I don't know. Like I grew up in Santa Cruz in Saint Elizabeth,
Yeah,
Jamaica, obviously, and it was very hot. It
yeah,
is very hot. It is like pasty, brutally hot because
yeah.
Santa Cruz is like a valley and it's surrounded by the Santa Cruz Mountains and it just is so hot and so the way I dealt with that situation was by having frequent showers and for some reason it's just like it's now like my go-to like and
Yeah,
it becomes my go-to for other things like if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling disoriented or overwhelmed, like I have
just
this
take a bath.
like really overwhelming feeling of just go take a shower and you're gonna feel better. So it's like taking a shower just fixes everything for
It's,
me.
that's super interesting. So, what's the longest that you've ever gone without taking a shower?
Oh God, not more than a day.
Not more than a day.
I
Okay.
don't think I've ever like not taken a shower
In a given day.
yeah, no, no, and
Okay.
like I can't sleep if I don't have a shower before going to bed.
Yeah,
I don't know, like it's
you
crazy.
gotta do
My kids like, oh my God, it's terrible because if they're sick, I'm like, go take a shower,
it.
so they're like, oh my God, mommy, like a shower
Yeah,
doesn't make everything better,
yeah, yeah,
but somehow I think it does.
yeah. Somehow. Okay. Tell me, do you remember what you wanted to do with your life at 5 years old?
I mean, I can't specifically remember 5 years old, but
Yeah.
I remember just I was a very bright kid, and I think I understood that very early. I recalled information very easily, and concepts came to me quickly, and I read very early and things like that. Like I was just a very bright kid, and I feel like I used to have obsess about things that little kids shouldn't be obsessing about, like
Yeah.
I remember like being ill and going to the doctor, and the thing that stuck out to me the most was like the letters behind the doctor's name. And
Really?
I became really obsessed with the fact
Yeah.
that he had these letters, and I was like, well, what do these letters mean? And
Yeah.
I think my mom at the time explained to me, like, he had it's his medical training and different certifications that he'd done, and I'd become really impressed by that. Like, how does someone earn that much education to have
Yeah.
those letters? And I wanted to have those letters, and I felt like I could, and that would have been really, really early, probably around the 4 or 5 mark. One of the things that I actually did as a pastime, so Sunday Gleaner was a big deal,
Yeah.
and our parents would go and they would buy the Sunday Gleaner, and the part of the Sunday Gleaner that I really loved was the career section.
Really?
Yes, I would like go through the careers and be like, oh, these are the jobs that people are,
Yeah,
like that are being advertised, and these are the qualifications that you need to have.
yeah,
And so like I was very clear on that. And I think later on I got more I can't remember when at which point, but I became like attracted to the business side of things.
okay,
At first it was just the doctor because he had all these letters.
yeah,
But at some point, like I had made a transition that, I wanted to be in business. Not quite sure how that came about. But yeah, like if you had asked me, back then, it would have been, I was going to be like a PhD at the time, I would say that. And it was going to be something maybe in economics or
yeah,
something. I was drawn to the whole, Jamaica has like a really good play of factors that allows, for example, now when interest rates are going up because there's high inflation, and
yeah,
people seem to be unfamiliar with that. And that's weird to me because that's what I grew up with. I grew
mm,
up with this dynamic of high inflation and interest rate management, and
yeah,
interest rates being as high as 20, 30, 40%. And what did that do to inflation? How did that affect the currency markets? Like, I grew up with that awareness, and I think I was attracted to that somehow. The idea of managing an economy, I think that's where it began. Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. So by the time you were doing CXC about 15, 16, where was your mind at that point?
Like at that time, I really wanted to be a PhD. Like
Yeah,
I felt like I was going to change the world somehow, and contribute. Like at the time I wanted to like make Jamaica better, and it was so hard.
yeah,
Like I felt like things were so difficult in Jamaica. I understood very clearly what the impact of high interest rates meant.
yeah,
And so that was my thing. After CXCs, I went on to sixth form and I did economics, studied economics at UWI, and loved it. Like
yeah,
it spoke to my soul, and I really enjoyed every moment of it. So, for example, with economics, I think one of the things that I was drawn to was, so there was math, but it wasn't explicit math. Like you're not just doing pure math. It was math with an idea of solving problems, and I really liked that. So when I went to U, I remember the first time, at the time we would actually see someone to register for your courses, not
yeah,
online. That didn't exist, and they convinced me, like, why don't you do a double major in econ and accounts? This was the first time they were doing that, and I'm like, I don't like accounts so much. But I did do it at A levels. I knew I didn't like. I ended up studying accounts, which I still
yeah.
don't like and never did like. But I guess it did offer a good complement to the economics degree. But that was always my goal, was like I'm gonna do economics, and that was where my heart was.
Okay, so you studied economics and accounting at university, and what do you do for a living now?
So I'm the senior product manager of. I have to remind myself because this recently changed. It's
Yeah.
European financing with Wayfair.
Okay,
Yeah.
how much of the what you learned back then impact your current role now?
So, like, that's a really interesting question, actually, because I feel like the personality that it takes to do something like economics that is solving social problems or trying to see things from a perspective of the consumer.
Yeah,
I'm still doing a lot of that. Like my role right now is to solve problems for consumers on a micro level. And funny
yeah,
enough, I really enjoyed microeconomics in university as well. But I kind of love that. Like I feel like this in the theory
yeah.
of economics probably is not translatable perfectly to what I do know. But I think the mindset and the openness to solving problems in that way, essentially the same personality that would enjoy those things,
Okay,
would really enjoy. So I've come a long way. Like my journey was not straight,
yeah.
but yeah.
Okay, tell me about that not straight journey. So, what's your career progression been like? So, since you left university, where did you go from job to job? Did you get hired a master's degree? How did that progress go?
Yeah, so interesting thing. When I was at UA, I tutored for my one of my economics professor, his stepchildren.
Okay,
Um, and I actually worked with his wife in her consultancy for a year after I left UA. And through that relationship, I had done some travel. She had a project management consultancy, met someone at Temple University who actually wrote a very strong recommendation letter for me. And I was able to get a full scholarship to go to Temple University.
Cool.
where I studied finance. On completing that, I did I worked at Franklin Templeton Investments in the United States, but it was post 9/11. It was a really
Mhm.
harsh climate for international students.
Okay.
And I felt like a second class citizen, and I didn't like that feeling. I'm like, I'm going home. I don't want to be treated this way.
Yeah.
So I went back to Jamaica, and largely speaking, I was in banking. So,
Okay.
since that was probably since the age of, say, 25,
Yeah.
because I completed my master's when I would have been like 24 years old, worked for a year in the US, went back to Jamaica, and I was in banking, like hardcore banking or financial services, I would say. So I was like, I worked at GMMB, I worked at Guardian Life, First
Okay.
Caribbean, NCB,
All
then
the big banks.
then I spent a good amount of time at Victoria Mutual. Like
Okay.
I didn't like what I was doing. I was in risk, I was in audit, and none of those things like spoke to my soul or any of the things that I wanted to do. And when I went to NCB, that was like, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I worked with Bob Blake, who is now the CEO. He was head of treasury then.
Mm.
Like absolutely brilliant. And I think it came back to like that economics thing again. Like we were such a big player in the foreign currency market. The central bank was calling us to, and they talk about moral suasion to, trade in a particular way or
Okay.
to because of the concerns around,
Yeah.
the foreign exchange rates and things like that. And so I that really spoke to me. I think I'd found a place that I really enjoyed. And then, I got the opportunity to head up the treasury at VMBS. And so I moved there to start and head up their treasury. And so that was a really cool experience as well.
Okay. So I guess VMBS was your last job before you made the jump to Canada, right?
And not my immediate last job. So
Okay.
before I came to Canada, I consulted for like a year during that
Uh,
transition period. I mostly worked with GMMB during that year. I think I was trying to find myself in a way, like what are those transferable skills that I would have to take to Canada? And it was good. Like,
yeah.
how would I work on my own? Could I be a contractor? Like I was doing a lot of research as well. Yeah, so
Okay. So tell me about Canada now. What sparked Canada? Why did you decide to go, and what was that process like?
it's weird. So a friend of mine from VMBS, he had immigrated to Canada. I asked him in passing, like, what was the process like with I would say zero effective interest. I was just asking out of curiosity. And a couple months after, or maybe a couple years even, I can't remember exactly when, he reached out to me and he said, he's like, Dreams, if you're really interested in coming to Canada, they're opening back up. So they had this program called Federal Skill Worker, but it would take certain number of people. And it was supposed to be the last cohort under that program, as it were. So at that time, the Canadian program of skill worker, like you needed to meet a minimum number of points. Once you
Yeah.
had those points and the quota was still, there was room in the quota, like availability or space, then you would essentially be approved. Now the program has changed where they have a certain number in mind,
Okay.
but they take the highest of the points. So, they give you points for like your qualifications, your experience, your age. The younger you are, the
Yeah.
better it is for you. And so they cream the highest points,
Yeah.
and that's who gets in. So it was a little bit easier then because you just had to meet the minimum threshold. So, he encouraged me to, he's like, if you're gonna do it, I think you should do it now because no one knows. They weren't telling you what express entry was gonna be, but there was a lot of talk and I think just a lot of uncertainty about what that should be.
Yeah.
And so I just I'm like, I should just do it. And there were like other things that were going on as well that made it feel right to me, like leaving Jamaica would have been the right decision for me at that time, which was hard. Like I didn't want to leave Jamaica.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
gone back home and I wanted to build a career there. But I taught part-time at the University of the West Indies. So I taught a course in currency management in their enterprise risk management program. And I think one of the things that really, really stood out urgently to me was my students, like they would graduate really, really bright people, had a hard time finding jobs.
Yeah.
And I started feeling, and a number of other reasons as well, but I started feeling like the economy was so small. Our lives were susceptible to small shocks. Not
Yeah.
even big shocks, but small
Yeah.
shocks. If you lost your job or became ill, and I started being concerned about like, is the economy big enough for my children? What's going to be their future here? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that decision rested on those dynamics, and
Yeah.
so I eventually did that program, like applied and made the move to Canada.
Awesome. That must have been very brave. What was the initial first month like being in Canada?
That's a really good question. So for us, I think one, we were trying to find somewhere to live, and we'd rented this
Yeah.
place from Jamaica. Like we sent wired money here to get an apartment. So you're trying to settle in. You're trying to create like a home so
Yeah.
that your kids feel a little bit more settled. And I feel like there was a lot of pressure on me to create that stability for my children. Like I was taking them up from a very stable situation. They had really, really good
Yeah.
lives, well-adjusted kids socially. My daughter was at Immaculate, my son was at St. Youth Prep, and they were very happy children. And
Yeah.
I literally uprooted them. My first month was spending time really just creating that center. But at the
Yeah.
same time, really understanding the Canadian market. Like I spent so much time talking to Jamaicans who had come to Canada or just
Yeah.
making connections. Like when I was leaving Jamaica, if I told someone I was going to Canada and they gave me a name or a contact, call this person, I called all of those people.
Nice.
Like and that worked out really, really well for me. I remember
Yeah.
that first month when I came to Canada, one of the ladies I had spoken to said, well, go and meet this particular lady at Scotiabank. And I was
Yeah.
like really well dressed. It's kind of a funny story, but anyway, really, really well dressed. Like, went to the bank thinking I'm gonna have
Yeah.
like kind of an impromptu interview, and then she was actually not there. Like, she was on vacation. It was so important to me,
Yeah.
but obviously not the same on the other side. She was just not there, and she didn't think about
Yeah.
the ramifications of missing a meeting. And I remember being like heartbroken
Mm.
because I was so excited. Maybe I was going to meet this person who was going to be able to help me to get a job. I remember taking a bus, and this is a lesson I learned. So I was going to the Jamaican consulate in Toronto
Okay.
um, because I needed like a driver's abstract or something to get my driver's license. And when I was getting off the bus, it was raining heavily. And I remember
Yeah.
standing up at the door and I'm thinking, oh my God, do I just ride on this bus or do I actually come off into this pouring rain in
Mm.
my
Yeah.
suit with all
Yeah.
my makeup?
My goodness.
Anyway, I got out the bus in the pouring rain, and in like
Yeah.
30 seconds, I was probably like soaked.
Yeah.
And I remember going into the consulate, and I actually saw a lady in there that I met, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" We had a conversation, and I'm like, I was so disoriented. I was like,
Yeah.
I think that was like for me, it felt like a valley. Like, oh my God, what have I done to myself? And I
Yeah.
remember she said to me, "This is your Canadian baptism."
That's
And
funny.
I thought about that, and like I've never not since then not used the weather app to see what's
Yeah.
going to happen. But it was significant for a number of reasons. So the lady who had actually introduced me to that lady, who was somebody I didn't know, just a connection of a connection. Like I stayed in touch with her. Like I remember just like I was so upset about that situation. But when she had asked me how it went, I kind of dumbed it down. But that lady actually introduced me to someone, or actually sent my resume to someone maybe 1 or 2 years after I came to Canada. And I feel like that job actually set me up for where I was. So when I came to Canada, like I had a list of things that I wanted to accomplish. I didn't want to be in the same industry. Like I was like, I don't want to be in banking anymore. I want to learn a new industry. I want to do something different. But banks were the actual ones reaching out to me because that's where all my experience was.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd gotten a little internship at TD Bank for a couple months, and thereafter I got multiple roles. But I was working with a company that it was like a really, really bad experience. I think I experienced racism for the first time. Small organization, and I think when it got really, really bad, I got a call one day out of the blues, no
Yeah.
expectation, from someone at Scotiabank, and they're like, "Well, this lady Vina had given them my resume. Am I still interested in the bank?" Because of the situation, like I was so negative in this
Yeah.
organization, I was like, "Yes, I'm definitely interested." And I'm telling you, like it was the pits at that point.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
started feeling like, it's gonna explode anytime. And so I got a call, maybe I think it was like a year after. And so one of the things that I'd learned in that experience even is, sometimes things don't work out the way that you want them to, but foster your relationships.
yeah,
Because this lady who had referred me, she was really kind. Like it
yeah.
wasn't her fault that this person who she referred me to was a little bit more glib about,
Amazing.
and so I, just handled situations with grace because I went to Scotiabank. It was as a senior product manager of corporate business deposits. It was a fairly, I would say, high profile role because we deal with large corporate institutions. And I remember the first project I was working on was like a negative interest rates for
Mhm.
euro deposits. And they wanted someone who would have that kind of understanding of the
Yeah,
currency markets and things like that. And shortly after I joined Scotiabank, they reorged, and our this division was called Global Business Payments. And so there was this huge focus on payments.
yeah,
And I started getting really, really curious about that because I had all this payments experience, but it wasn't called payments because I was in treasury in Jamaica. And, what we do there is a lot more generalized. So Canada, North America is a lot more specialized. And so I kind of got like really interested, started changing up my resume.
yeah,
I wanted to ride this payments wave kind of like, how could I
yeah,
capitalize on this? And so I did that. I updated my LinkedIn to reflect that, read as much as I could as about the payments transformation that was taking place in Canada. There was a lot of modernization on a macro scale, so like their RTGS or their real-time gross settlement systems.
yeah,
There was a lot of payments disruption taking place on a micro scale with technology organizations as well. So, there were a lot of startups in the payment space that were disrupting the old way of moving monies.
yeah.
And I was really curious about that. Anyway, I got a job at Walmart
Okay.
because of that Scotiabank job, because of the payments name, just because the name had changed. I had these skills, but because the name had changed,
Yeah.
I now became like a payments person. I was placed in that space
Uh,
totally, outside of my doing. So I was recruited because payments now, like I mentioned, was a hot thing. Recruited
yeah.
by Walmart as their senior product manager of payments in
Okay.
in e-commerce, and then later Omni. Like the role kept changing, and I ended up at Wayfair
Mm.
in product still, but in the space of financing. So
Okay. Well, I'm really happy that you ended up at Wayfair.
yeah, me
Because
too.
that's where we met and that's where we are co-workers together. What would you say has been most challenging things that you've faced throughout your career? I know you've mentioned racism, from a personal level. What were those challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I think a couple things. So if I look back at my journey in Jamaica, I think being a country girl, no connection,
Yeah,
um, the biggest issue would have been just how do I get my foot into that first job? Thankfully, because I'd worked with Dr. Witter and his wife, they were able to employ me. And that was a tutoring job that became like a full-time role. But I think overcoming that hurdle for is sometimes difficult. Like you're in a new space, you don't know anyone. That was difficult at the outset. I think later on in life, I'd realized that, especially like at the VMBS days, I think there was a glass ceiling that I'd hit. As a
mm,
woman, I felt like there was still, unfortunately, there was a space that was more, I would say, carved out for men.
yeah,
And the space that I was in, investment trading, treasury world, was a man's world. And I felt like it was okay for men to say certain things, but not for women. And I'd started to feel that way as well. I had to get to a place of acceptance because the place of, when you're young, the tendency is to rebel against it. That doesn't
yeah.
necessarily always bring the right change. So I had to learn to rebel in a more strategic way, put it that way.
I like that. Good.
Um, yeah, so, and then coming to Canada, I think, like I mentioned, I had experienced racism for the first time, and it was one of those things that really was confounding. Like I was really confused because
Yeah,
I'd not experienced it before. I'd studied in the US, but truthfully, I don't recall experiencing racism when I was in the US. But and the thing about it is that, Canadians are very polite. And so they're not direct. So it's a very covert kind of a thing. It's hard to put your finger on. It's not easy to make it tangible. But over time, you recognize certain trends. And this one job that I was in is particularly, and the lady I was reporting to, it became so obvious after a while, whereas I understood very clearly that I was a token black girl. I was
Mm,
not employed for, I had the qualifications, but truthfully, I was a token black girl that I needed to
mm,
be, because there's this thing where companies are they're very deliberate about employing people of different ethnicities.
diversity.
And it's a
Yeah.
small company, so they could get away with having just one or two blacks, and I was
Yeah.
one of those. And so I understood that after a while. And that was really, really hard. I think
Yeah.
in a way, it's probably one of the hardest thing I've encountered professionally, because it
Mm,
trimmed me down in a way that I was not used to. Like I had lost so much of my confidence, didn't want to speak up anymore, and so I would say Scotiabank, because it has so much policies and a
yeah.
lot of structure, it was a good place to be. But truthfully, I feel like it was really Walmart where you were going to do well based on your performance.
Yeah.
It wasn't about, it was, fairly diverse, but you were going to do well based on your performance. And that started helping me to start feeling more confident again, because I wasn't being judged based on the fact that I was Jamaican, or that
Yeah.
my accent was a little bit different, my hair is different, things like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And I know you had a major setback at Walmart with the diagnosis.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, about a year and a couple months into my Walmart journey, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
It was just before, it was like November 2019, just before Black Friday. I remember my husband and I were planning on Black Friday sales because we were buying a house, and we're like,
Yeah.
well, we're gonna go and, purchase all these things on sale. So we were pretty excited about Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
And, on I think at the start of November, I'd found a tumor in my breast. I'd found a lump in my breast.
Yeah.
A lot of different. It took 3 weeks until I was fully diagnosed, because
Okay.
what breast cancer testing is they do different levels of diagnosis. So when I went into the doctor, she would have confirmed that there was a lump. After confirming that there was a lump, she sent me for ultrasound. So I do the
Yeah.
ultrasound, comes back it's inconclusive. Then I do the mammogram. It says suspicious, but it's still not conclusive. And you go for like a biopsy.
Yeah.
So I was diagnosed fully on November 21st, 2019, and then November 29th, I did a lumpectomy. And that was at Walmart.
Yeah. And they were gracious to you throughout that period of
Yeah,
dealing
like,
with the breast cancer.
yeah, I think and I've told a story before. So one of the things that I think has impacted me the most, like
Yeah.
just as a human being, as an employee, and maybe has created like a blueprint for me in terms of how I want to be. Like, this is the kind of person I want to be for people who I interact with in the future.
Yeah.
So I was at Walmart a little over a year. Black Friday, as you know, in retail is a huge, huge, huge event.
Yeah.
Huge at Walmart e-commerce,
Yeah.
really big. And I was in charge of payments. So it's not any small thing for them. I remember when I first, before I found the lump, I wasn't feeling well. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't sleeping well, had a lot of insomnia. I didn't go to work like the Thursday, Friday. The Sunday night, when I found that lump, it was like we spoke about bathing a lot. I'd had a couple showers that day already,
Yeah.
went into the shower a third time. Like I wasn't falling asleep. I had, really bad insomnia leading up to that period. Took another shower, and somehow that late night shower led to me finding this lump. For me, I really believe that God whispered in my ear and said,
Yeah.
because it's very fuzzy for me. Like I don't know why at maybe 11 o'clock at night I'd be checking my breast, quite honestly.
Yeah. I know, right?
Um, so I'd found this lump. And God places people in your life that you need at that time. And I think, like, in my life, God has placed people that I need in that moment. Just like that lady who referred me to someone at Scotiabank without my
Mm.
knowing, and it was just at the right time when I was like at the in the valley of that experience. And
Yeah.
throughout my entire life, I would say that has been a thread. Like, God just places people in my life. Even my economics professor and his wife, like, things were so hard. Like, I was so poor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's not new in terms of the way God has taken care of me.
Yeah.
My director at Walmart, she had a breast cancer diagnosis, and she had just returned to
Mm.
Walmart
Yeah.
from her breast cancer treatment. She was on short-term disability. And she showed me a lot of compassion. So when I told her, listen, I'd found this lump, and my husband, like, I was gonna go to work. I'm like, I'll see Dr. Amal, who is my family doctor, in a couple days. And he insisted that I go to the doctor. He's like, no, no, no.
Mm.
You
That
have to
works.
go and check it out.
Yeah.
That can't wait. And then, I remember I was working on Alyssa on a presentation, and she was like, I thought you were coming in for this. And I explained to her, listen, Alyssa found a lump. But because
Mm.
of her own experience, that God just placed her in that right
Yeah.
space for me. And she was very supportive of that, like, because it's multiple times. And at that time, it was pre-pandemic. There was no telephone health. Like, no, I can talk to my doctor over the phone, but then it was
Yeah.
always come into my office. I went and checked that out. I remember when I was diagnosed, my senior vice president. So I'm diagnosed on November 21st.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, so many things just going through my head. And I went through, like, a period of catharsis, I would say, with my cancer diagnosis. Like, it gave me a lot of release because I'd come into this discernment or epiphany that I couldn't carry cancer plus a lot of the other stress that I was carrying.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I got home the night, I sent an email to my senior vice president, my vice president, my director, and I said, today I was diagnosed with breast cancer. The surgeon wants to be pretty aggressive. It was a grade 3 carcinoma, which is an aggressive tumor. I mean, it's fast growing,
Yeah.
and they have science around, like, the speed at which it doubles is how cancer grows.
Okay.
So, like, it grows very slowly. Imagine something going from, like, say, a percentage of a millimeter, and then it takes a while to double, and then it doubles, and then by the time it gets to
Exponentially.
2 centimeters, let's say it's doubling every week, or let's say,
Okay.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but the growth rate increases very fast at certain age. So they grade cancer, like, we talk about cancer staging a lot, but they also grade the
Mm.
tumors to determine how aggressive. And breast cancer has a lot of research behind it. And so I had a grade 3 carcinoma. The surgeon was very, like, he's like, let's not sit on this. Let's get the surgery scheduled very quickly. And so I'd written this email to my seniors, explained to them that I'm going to apply for leave to be able to deal with this. It was, like I mentioned, the 21st, Black Friday, when I did the surgery. Actually, it was
Yeah.
November 29th. And I remember, like, sending the email late the night, waking up to a response the morning from my senior vice president, which I didn't expect, especially because it was so early in the morning. And he was so gracious. Like, he basically said, this is what I know about you, Andrina. You're strong and you're going to kick cancer's ass. And he literally
Yes.
said those things, and he
Yeah.
just said, don't worry about work. We're going to deal with this. Like, take whatever time you need. Like, however you want to approach your treatment, we're here to support you in that. And then there was my director saying to me, listen, take the short term disability. Your job is going to be here when you come back. I took short term disability. I'm sure she was saying to me, she was sharing her experience.
Yeah.
She's like, it allowed me to focus on just feeling better and not being tired while I'm in treatment. And so there was just a lot of empathy. And it wasn't like, well, I took short term disability and it's good enough for me, but it's not good enough for you.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. And it's, hey, it's a really bad time. Can you, like,
Mm.
delay your surgery until after Black
After
Friday?
Black
Like,
Friday.
it
Yeah.
wasn't, it was always, this is work. It's going to be okay. You're going to have a place here. We want you to know that you're supported and you're loved, and whatever the decision or what's right for you. And, it's an email that I keep,
Yeah.
my email from, I call it my Nikolai email.
Okay.
It's very powerful. I'd actually shared it on LinkedIn at one
Okay.
point,
Yeah.
because I felt like this is what leadership is.
Yeah.
This is what leadership is. and this is the kind of leader that I would want to be. This is the kind of person that I want to be. Over time, I've collected a bunch of mentors. You know,
Yeah.
I've collected a bunch of people in my life, and it may be like you, Ryan, like your story has
Yeah.
inspired me. So I'm not talking about mentors that are,
Yeah.
that we think are in the typical sense of a mentor, but I find people who inspire me and I reach out to them and I'm deliberate about making that connection because something in their story has resonated with me.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I think for me has been really powerful in just trying to help me to be that person that I want to be. Like I think about it sometimes. Like, I think when you're faced with cancer, when you have that kind of situation, like one of the things that you do is there's a lot of introspection and you think about death. And I think about death in practical terms. And one of the things that I think about it in terms of death is what would I want someone to say in my eulogy?
Yeah.
What do I want my children to say about me when I'm gone? What do I want like my family to remember or the people that I engage with or interacted? What do I want them to remember about me? And so these little collections of mentorship or little collections of interactions, I think all of them kind of go together to just try to help me to be that person who I really want to be. Like,
Yeah.
this is how I want to leave a footprint on the world.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really powerful. And I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, I have 10 rapid fire questions for you. Don't think
Okay.
too hard about them. The first answer that comes to your mind, shoot. All right. So have you ever used someone else's toothbrush?
Yes.
Yes. Who?
Yes, my husband's like
Yeah.
it's terrible. We're way too close.
Okay. Well, that's permissible. If you could compare yourself with any animal, which would it be and why?
Oh my God, an animal. Maybe a lioness. Yeah, I'm very protective of my cubs. I
Yeah.
can be fierce.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely a hunter. I'm looking for those
Okay.
opportunities. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That's nice. All right. It's 7 o'clock on the dot. Where is Usher?
Where is Usher, the
Yeah.
the musician Usher,
Yeah.
in the studio?
Try again. Brr. It's 7 o'clock on the dot.
Oh, is it a truck stop? What did the lyrics
That
say?
rhymes. He's in his drop top.
Oh, that's kind of funny because like I was always that kid who like never heard the lyrics and just made up
Okay.
lyrics. Yeah,
seven
so
o'clock on the dot in my truck stop.
yes, that's right. That's so hilarious.
Oh boy. All right. Coffee or tea?
Oh my God, coffee.
Coffee. All
Yeah,
right.
way too much coffee.
Way too much. Would you rather be an expert at one thing or pretty good at many things?
I like being good at many things. Canada has tried to make me a specialist,
Okay.
but I still call on my multiple skills,
Yeah.
from my generalist background. So, yeah, I like being multifaceted.
Okay. What's
Yeah.
your favorite book?
My favorite book, probably the Poisonwood Bible.
Okay.
So I'm trying to remember the name of the author, but the Poisonwood Bible, what stood out to me was this missionary had tried to, he'd gone somewhere in Africa and he was trying to convert people, and there was so many language barriers, and
Yeah.
he would say something in their own language and it meant something completely different because it didn't
Yeah.
translate. Like words don't translate one for one, and that, yeah, I think that what that told me is like, don't impose ourselves on other people. Don't impose our
Yeah.
experiences on other people. Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely interesting. What's one of your biggest fears?
I would say one of my biggest fears is for my children not to finish like university. One of the things that I ask God for is to just to be here for them until they at least finish university. I'm like, if you can help me to be there to guide them through that
Yeah.
period.
The lioness in you.
That's yeah.
If you could have a conversation with any person in history, who would it be?
Probably Michael Manley.
Okay.
Yeah, I was definitely a Michael Manley fan. I found that he spoke well, inspired me in economics.
Yeah.
Uh, Even though people, didn't necessarily agree with his
Yeah.
economics. But yeah, Michael
Michael
Manley.
Manley.
I actually had a conversation with Edward Siaga at one point, who
Okay,
so
cool.
so he's not someone I would want to have because I did have it with him.
Okay. What makes you angry?
Being late.
Being
I
late.
don't. Yeah, like my oh my God, my husband is perpetually late. Like
Yeah,
I'm a stickler for time, and he's always late.
yeah,
But generally speaking, I don't want to be late, and I
yeah.
don't want other people to be late for, for appointments or things that I have with them. I feel like it's disrespectful.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And the final question, what was the first movie you remember seeing in the theater?
Oh my God. I can't remember. Like, why can't I remember? I'm not like a huge movie goer kind of a person,
Mhm.
but I'm feeling like it was one of the Star Wars movies.
Okay,
Yeah.
Star Wars. Okay. All right, so the next time you find someone who wants to pursue something in economics, payments, that kind of financial thing, but they doubt themselves or they may just have obstacles, whether it be racism or being a woman in the workplace, how would you encourage them to pursue their goals and their dreams?
It's not a single response, but I'd say this that dream big, right? Like start with that, like dream big and try different things. I was criticized a lot by my peers for moving so many times. Like I've worked at most of the banks in Jamaica.
Yeah,
But I moved because the things that I was doing didn't resonate with my soul.
yeah,
And then I found that thing. And there were challenges, but I feel like I continued to persevere through that because there was like a space I wanted for myself. There was an experience that I wanted that I knew was out there. I didn't quite know what it was. And so I encourage young people to start with your passion, start with things that really resonate with your soul. And this is what I tell my children all the time. If you can find like something that you love, then you don't feel like you're working as much. And so start with the things that you love and go for it. Shake it off. Shake it off. Like things happen. Go through the process of experiencing it, of grieving about it, but don't let it define who you are because in the end, it's your footprint that matters, right? Like it's
yeah,
not the situations that come at you, it's just how you've dealt with it and how you've persevered through it. And so start with your passion, be sensible also. One of the things that I see Jamaicans doing, for example, they come to Canada and they're studying some random things. They have no passion around it, one. They're not really marketable
yeah,
areas, two. And so they have difficulties finding jobs or finding good jobs. The problem is not because you're Jamaican or you've done this or that. The problem is
yeah,
that you're in a wrong area.
yeah.
So start with your passion. Like you'd say, Ryan, just set your goals and stick with it, right?
And stick with it. All right. Thank you so much, Andrina. This was great. So happy that we made it happen. And thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sure lots of people will really be encouraged by it.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. God bless.
Okay. All right. See you. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Take care.